Welcome in to another new podcast from Coatings Pro Magazine. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, and I'm the news editor for the AMP publications team. AMP, of course, is the shorthand acronym for the Association for Materials Protection and Performance, of which Coatings Pro is a member magazine. Today, we're chatting with Kyle McDonald, project manager at Western Specialty Contractors based in Delray Beach, Florida. If his name sounds familiar, Kyle's team was featured in our newly released November issue of Coatings Pro with a case study on their project at the Esplanade. That story starts on page 30 and is titled Rooftop Transformation, the Restoration and Coating of a Luxury Palm Beach Retail Destination. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking more about that project with Kyle, as well as some overall business tips and career advice that he's gained over many years as a coatings contractor. Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time. Why don't you start by telling our listeners a little bit more about your career background and, generally speaking, the journey that's taken you to where you are today?
All right. Good morning, Ben. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. And thank you for the outstanding work you guys do over at Coatings Pro as really an industry leader there in the latest trends. Yeah, my background, I've been in the industry for 12 years, and I initially came out of big civil and new construction up in the Midwest, where the coatings are a little bit different, but that was my introduction to them, was on interstate bridge overlays. If you remember kind of about a decade ago when we sort of saw the reality of the impact of a deteriorating infrastructure system, a lot of the bridge work went out, and the opportunity for structures that were still maintainable at a structural level, coatings became a huge trend at that point, whether it was an epoxy overlay or a latex modified overlay. From that, again, I was up in the Midwest doing that, came down to Florida here with Western, take a look at a unique problem down here, which has to do with the environment and how concrete and these structures hold up. As most of these structures now hitting 40 to 50 years old, sort of the same age that we sort of saw a lot of things in the big civil market start to deteriorate. And the question, of course, is how can coatings preserve these structures that we have in sort of this, I'm going to say a new application, but when we build it first, we never think that we think concrete's going to stay forever. But as we all learned about a decade ago, and we continue to learn, the importance of these coatings now, especially in this climate down here. So that's been my career up to date. My job is to educate, to go out and inspect issues, to take a look and see what the best solution is in conjunction with the owner and engineer. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Western in that.
And also, as far as Western, what's the background there? I mentioned that your group is based out of Delray Beach, Florida, but obviously Western is much larger than that. For anyone that's not too familiar, how large is Western? What does your group do? And what does Western as a whole do?
Well, Western's nationwide. Western's over 100 years old, based out of St. Louis, Missouri originally. Western has a footprint all over the United States, which gives us the opportunity to really share a lot of information. The way that concrete is, weathers deteriorates, with coatings, weather deteriorate, take the abuse is different in New York than it is in Florida, but it may be more similar to Houston. A Western as a whole is restoration contractor for almost all your envelope, whether it's roofing, coatings, sealants. We're the number one masonry contractor. There's really not a whole lot when it comes to keeping the water out that Western is not just does, but has a long history. We've been down here in Florida for close to 50 years. And again, we've been nationwide for over 100. So it's a real blessing to be in an organization like this.
Yeah, and to follow up on the coating of concrete substrates, because at Coatings Pro, we cover concrete, steel, and roofs. Obviously, you all specialize in concrete restoration. What are some of the unique factors when it comes to concrete as a substrate and some of the, concerns related to corrosion or materials degradation? What are the types of things that you're having to think of pertaining to concrete specifically?
That was, transparently, that was my biggest learning experience as I went to a different climate. My background's up in northern climates, and concrete's concrete. It's going to do two things. It's going to turn gray and it's going to crack. But up there, we have a slab thickness because of the freeze-thaw cycle and the heave that is pretty standard. As we come down here, there's a lot more post-tension, which obviously saves money on the front end, but on the back end, the margin for error is much, much less. So while examining a minor crack or a small crack in a northern climate, we might say, okay, well, we've got another 8 inches, we've got another 11 inches before we're through on this thing. It's probably okay. We probably just clean it up and it doesn't present any sort of structural issue. Down here, the margin can be much thinner as we look at some of these thinner decks, these post-tension decks. A lot of things that are pore thinner because we don't have free salt, but we do have the salt environment. We have a heavy, heavy salt environment. About 90% of our projects down here are oceanfront. And once it gets in, you pretty much just hit it on the head. The corrosion of the steel is rapid. It's very rapid. That then creates a conduit within that concrete. Now for water to continue to channel through and begin, because it's not always as thick as we're used to seeing, or I'm used to seeing in northern environments, we could have a through crack very fast, a very rapid deterioration if it does get into the substrate.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's on the forefront of a lot of minds these days. We're recording this in October 2024. Obviously, Florida's had a couple of hurricanes in the last 2 months that have generated headlines across the country and all around the world. So I think those types of concerns are thought of even more when you have these natural disasters that, potentially exacerbate some of those underlying issues. For our listeners, I should note that we're recording this interview, as mentioned, in October, but we're also doing it for purposes of the upcoming Contractor Bio section in our next print issue, which will be January 2025. November is already done, so we're working on January here at Coatings Pro. And so if you want to see some of this in a written article form, then please check out that issue once it comes out. That should be towards the end of 2024. And as a side note, I do think you'll see a few more of these interviews in podcast form throughout 2025. The idea is that we're doing a lot of these types of interviews regardless for content in our print magazine. So this is an opportunity for us here at Coatings Pro to potentially multi-purpose and to provide you, our listeners, with content in multiple formats. So Kyle, jumping back into the interview, I mentioned the Esplanade, which was a case study in our November issue. I'm sure that was memorable for you. Over those 12 years, what are some of the more memorable projects for you at Western? And I guess as a part B of that question, what is it that makes a project memorable to you? Is it the challenges overcome? Is it the type of asset that you're preserving? Is it the work collaboratively that you do with crew members? Just speak, if you could, to both, some standout projects from your time at Western, as well as just what it is in general that makes a project stand out.
I'll start with your last question first, right? Which is, what does make a project stand out? Every contractor, every engineer, and every owner would love to say that the standout project is the one that goes exactly how we all thought it was going to go from the beginning to the end. Unfortunately, that's not the reality of the industry. So the standout projects are the ones where the collaboration between all three parties gets everyone to a cost-effective solution based upon variables that come up in the project, because that's the reality of it. So the ones that stand out to me, you've obviously mentioned an Esplanade. Another was Broward Financial Center down here that the Fort Lauderdale team did a few years ago. And you mentioned the natural disaster. Hurricane Wilma came through. Hurricane Wilma did a very interesting track through Florida, where it came through the west. We're obviously on the southeast portion of the state. It came across the Everglades. And so it actually hit southeast Florida from a very unique path, which was from the west. And so the idea with most hurricanes, obviously, you're going to construct and have everything very safe from the east. And this one came from the west. And so what happened? The wind shear actually blew out a lot of windows at Broward Financial Center. There was a lot of impact from Wilma on that. The solution, it was featured as a Trinity Award winner of the work that Western did there. And the reason that it was featured as a Trinity Award winner was not necessarily because of anything special that Western did, but because of the collaborative effort between the engineering firm, the ownership, and Western on the fly to continue to engineer, to establish what went wrong, and in the reconstruction to make sure that we didn't do anything that was going to affect the underlying integrity. That project's a stand-up project from a few years ago. We have some information about that one on the website. It was recently featured. And then Esplanade. Esplanade is your feature in the magazine. Esplanade was a very unique project, not because of any environmental concerns, but more because of time and customer needs. It's a luxury area, very luxury area of Palm Beach. And again, in the original design, the original look, the thought was we probably needed to go into the structural slab. As the reality of that in this climate, which is South Florida and some working hour restrictions and working time restrictions based from the city, all three parties came to an agreement that we probably were not going to find a window where it wouldn't rain in South Florida. Down here, we kind of are in that summertime, we're kind of in that constant tropical cycle where it could pop up a rainstorm that's going to drop 2 to 3 inches in 15 minutes. The sun comes back out. So the decision was made to look in, and this got the product manufacturer involved as well. How can we allow all the tenants underneath to not have any sort of fear that their ceiling will be open, that their operations were under the threat of, a downpour? How could we do this without blowing the budget, without coming up with some insane system? And the solution was come to, which was we can do this through coding. And I thought it was a very unique application, working with the engineer, working with the product supplier, working with the manufacturer, working with the owner, come with a really cost-effective solution that brought this actually right at the original budget, very close to, and on time. And the decision there was to thicken up the coating, do a PMMA system at the deck drains, and the amount of work that we all did together there in a very tight window is something that is probably always going to stand out to me is one of the best collaborative efforts between engineer, owner, and everyone doing their part, knowing what their role was in that, and then having quick, effective solutions all the way through. We got the job done, got the project done on time, and to everyone's satisfaction, on budget. That doesn't always happen. It was remarkable and great to be a part of it.
So on that subject, as far as the materials you used and the processes to complete that project, I want to ask you about industry trends, but from a couple of different perspectives. First off, is there anything you're seeing from your clients as far as the types of technologies that they want? And then as a follow-up to that, be it in terms of materials or I suppose application equipment or processes, you mentioned Florida and the climate, the constant rain presenting its own challenges. So, you don't always have the cure time that you might have if you're in another part of the U.S. where the weather is more stable. So what are, I guess, the materials or equipment or processes that are more friendly to you to, complete an application during the summer in Florida where, in the afternoon you may have 5 or 6 hours of thunderstorms that roll through. And so you don't always have time to, to let a certain layer cure if need be. So speak, I guess, to both client demands, what they want on the technical side, as well as some of the materials or processes or equipment that you all use on the application side to make sure that, it actually works in Florida.
Yeah, it's fascinating question, right? Because that's the prime question is basically
how do you blend the two?
Product life for cost. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what any consumer wants, whether it's a building or, you're going clothes shopping. How long am I going to get the protection that this offers me? And what is the cost difference between me going with an older technology or an older product that may not have the longest product life, or go with a newer or thicker product that currently may have a higher cost on the front end, but have a longer product life on the back end. And so in that, we're seeing, we are seeing a trend where we want to, owners, and rightfully so, and engineers, they want to see budgets of urethanes versus pumice. I mean, we're just seeing that down here in the deck coating quite a bit. Um, and they both have their advantages and disadvantages. As far as an application time, obviously the Pumas go down a lot faster, right? How much the client interruption is a big deal, right? Especially like you talked about with the weather down here, that once we strip off the existing coating, there's the risk and the gamble. On a Puma system, we can get it down. It cures really fast, right? On a urethane system with multi-layer, we're down, but we do need 3 layers, or 2 layers to get stable. And that can be a gamble with the weather. So we are seeing that it almost, I wouldn't say in everyone, but almost everyone is upfront, which is budgetary discussions. And Western loves doing this. It's part of our client relationships to look at budgets for the next year and to try to make sure we can get out accurate proposals so that those decisions can be made by, the stakeholders with real implications of, with this system, you may get, you're likely looking at 15 to 20. On this system, you're looking at 5. But here's the cost impact, and here's the application difference. So one other trend we're starting to see down here, it hasn't got widespread yet, but we're starting to see it, comes out all the way back to what we were talking about with the nature of the concrete decks down here and how thin they are, is there is some appetite for experimenting with some of these penetrating coatings. Some of these penetrating coatings that have warranty terms to fix cracks within, over time as more water hits them. We are seeing an appetite for that. And I think it's going to be fascinating as time goes on, as it's understood more and more that protecting the concrete initially is much more cost effective than fixing it later. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing a bunch of new interesting technologies of and so the more and more of those come in, I think it'll continue to be interesting over the next 5 to 10 years to see what new products are offered by some of these suppliers out here.
I know a lot of it also comes down to the crew members and the crew leaders that you have in place, because ultimately in Florida, you can have a thunderstorm roll through in an afternoon and you've got to, on very short notice, demobilize a job site, do the best you can to protect the substrate. I know you monitor the weather forecast, but obviously there's things that can pop up on very short notice. And so to preserve a project, to get it done on schedule, a lot of it comes down to these crew members being able to work collaboratively in a very quick manner. Coatings are complicated enough to apply in any environment. And so you add some of those Florida challenges that we've been describing, and that certainly adds to it even more. And so I think that ties in with the larger theme that we're seeing across the industry, which is workforce development and workforce retention. We know the challenges that are projected as the years move forward. So I guess my question for you, Kyle, is how important is having the right crew members to seeing these types of projects succeed? And then for your group at Western, and I guess Western as a whole, what are some of the strategies that you all have to, find and retain the staff that you need?
I think, the first point is the crew is everything. The guys on the ground that's where the work is being done. That's where the product's being applied. That is what the customer is, and the client that they're actually installing and directing how this is going down, when it's going down, and making sure it happens. They are everything. Guys like me, I used to be a field guy, and I've been lucky enough to move in this industry. But at the end of the day, my job means nothing without those guys. What I do means nothing without those guys. So what Western, and we understand that, Western's retention rate is unbelievable as far as the industry average. A lot of our guys here have been with us for multiple decades, down here in South Florida. And this is the case nationwide. Western understands that our people are everything, and that they're not just machines, because it's, knowledge of the application, knowledge of what could go wrong, knowledge of that it's some things that Western understands that is something that you can put a price tag on. When you lose that, I've been in this industry for well over a decade. I've been in other industries that maybe that wasn't as well understood. Western understands the institutional knowledge is a real thing. And so First Western does have a very heavy emphasis on recruiting and trying to get the best that we can down here. Because at the end of the day, Western does, we stand behind our product, we stand behind our application, and that requires an unbelievable workforce in the field. We all know across the industry, it's no secret to anybody listening. It's been a struggle for about a decade for new entries into the workforce. And so we've gotten creative, not just through job fairs, but through a really nationwide hunts. And Western's advantage in the idea that we are nationwide. If we have people in other areas of the country that could be of good service to Western somewhere else, Western has those programs in place, those opportunities that people can move around within Western if they're willing to relocate to help us out somewhere else. I think that's really unique to Western. Not a lot of people have that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's that you provide them with more flexibility as they progress, not just in their careers, but alongside other changes in their lives. And so I think that, that's a unique spot in the marketplace because, everyone can point to salary. And so the financial side of the business is what it is. You have to be able to pay competitive rates. But then there's all these other considerations, let's call it lifestyle factors, because I think that's what you're talking about, to sort of go the extra mile. I'm sure, safe working practices and having the best safety plans and equipment is part of it too. But the bottom line is, aside from the obvious of finances, which applies to pretty much any job anywhere, it sounds like those lifestyle factors, the human factors, are sort of the best, tips and best practices that you all have found at Western. Is that a fair characterization?
100%. And I speak from experience on that, having come from, great organizations in the industry before in other places. But Western, having been a family-owned operation for over 100 years, truly understands that the people are what makes it. The people are absolutely, at the end of the day, what makes a successful organization, a successful project. Mm-hmm. And like you said, with the lifestyle factors, I think it's that's a big point. I have a colleague down here who recently came down from North Carolina. The opportunity was there, just look at where things were at in North Carolina, and the opportunity for a change, and look at, well, rather than look somewhere else, why don't we look right within Western? And it's been an unbelievable asset adding to it, because not only do we get the benefit of having him, we also get all of North Carolina's institutional knowledge. And I think that's the real beauty of Western. And like you mentioned, safety. Safety is a nationwide operation for us, and it gets everybody involved. We have regional safety directors, national safety director, branch safety director, and our foreman on site. Our safety process is a true team effort, and we are able to learn from what someone, let's say, in Minneapolis is doing, right? You don't think of Minneapolis and South Florida as having a whole lot in common until maybe they've come up with something or they've discovered something. And at Western, we find out very fast, oh, hey, up in Minneapolis, this is working or this isn't working. And we get to have a quick conversation at a national level, and a regional level, and then a branch level. Will that work for us? And so that exchange of information, I think, is crucial. And it really does have that team environment. The idea at Western that, like you said, if you have a lifestyle change or you want to change the scenery, a change of scenery used to always mean, all right, well, I better get on the Indeed or get my resume out there or call Union.
Right.
A change of scenery here might say, hey, I think I want to see a different part of the country. And Change Star Western has that opportunity for it.
Interesting. All right. So we've talked a lot on this episode about your 12 years in the industry and some of the keys to your success and Western's success over that last decade plus. I'm curious what you think the next decade or so is going to look like as we close out the 2020s, move towards the 2030s. And, hopefully you and Western continue to have success. I'm sure you will, given, as you've mentioned, the extremely long history that Western has in this field. But in terms of market changes, what do you think your job is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now that's different than how it is today or how it's been for the last 12 years? Where do you think projects are going, and how are you all at Western preparing for that?
I think the topic we just discussed is workforce and technology. Having the right team in place. At some point, people like to retire, and they deserve that. Is making sure that generational knowledge is passed down before people decide to go spend the rest of their lives doing something that's not working. That means recruitment. That means it not just on a field level. That means on college campuses, construction management, everywhere else, a nationwide search for who are the next people in this industry and how can we, one, utilize what they are, like the younger generation is so good at and so much better than even I consider myself is with technology. But how can we pass some of that field generational knowledge that you can't teach in a classroom, incorporate the two so that we can continue to grow and be the most successful as well as provide the best options for all of our clients. Something that I just mentioned was technology too. I think as we get into concrete, especially to talk about concrete, the technology and the coding, as well as the ability to do investigative through GPR scanning, as there are advances in that, I see that being something that very interesting going forward. There are some new products out there now, some anodes that are being attached to rebar, potentially to maintain the lifespan of it. I think it's going to continue to be, and I see it happening in almost an exponential way. New minds, new talent coming in, generational knowledge, and new technologies all coming together to really address something that I hate to say we've probably been sleeping on for a very long time, which is the fact that if we don't address the structural small stuff now, it turns into much, much bigger stuff later. The opportunities to address it and to take it very seriously, that if we address small problems now, we can head off big, big problems later. Unfortunately, we've seen a number of tragic situations. But the idea is that hopefully everyone can learn from those experiences. And that's what I'm seeing over the course of the next 5-10 years is a real heavy emphasis on how can we get out ahead of this rather than behind it when it may be too late or it's really, really cost prohibitive to do anything to maintain some of these wonderful, wonderful structures we have down here.
Let me follow up real quickly on the workforce component of it, because at AMP, I would say blue-collar recruitment is definitely something that we want to get more involved in, trying to attract more of the next generation to this industry. And obviously that starts, with trade schools and programs that are at the high school level, the collegiate level, making this industry seem viable to people at a very young age before they're entrenched on other paths. So you're obviously involved in some of those conversations. I'm sure you've seen people that, entered at a young age and have successfully transitioned into making this a good living, a good career for themselves. What do you see the keys as being when it comes to, making this industry appealing to people at the lowest level so that we can build up that pipeline?
That's fascinating, because I'll be the first to tell you that it was not appealing to me at first. My background, I was an English and political science major and thought I was going to sit at a desk all day. I have a wonderful life in this industry, right? There's problem solving every day. Basically anything that anyone would look for in a career, right, is I want it to be challenging. I want it to be rewarding. I want to be actively mentally engaged. And I want to put out something that I can be proud of. But this industry, and the construction industry as a whole, the restoration industry, construction, whatever, what you're doing, that satisfies all those things. Every day is something new. There is always some sort of substrate condition or subgrade condition that's something that could not be foreseen, which is going to require problem solving. You do get to move from project to project. I am blessed. I'd say sometimes it seems like a fantasy life. I really kind of go up and down the east coast of Florida, getting to visit some of the most luxurious, iconic properties down here, and be a part of the solution to maintain these structures. It was really something I could have never. And if you would have told me at 18 years old that this would be how it would transpire, that was not the vision I had of what construction was or what this industry was. And then the financial component, it goes without saying. People are not, I've been able to have a very good life for myself. And my colleagues, my peers, whether engineers, architects, on the contractor side, property management side, you're going to be able to have a family. You're going to be able to provide a life by learning something. The biggest thing at the end of the day, though, you get to walk away from something that you're very proud of. I think every construction guy does it. You can't drive by a property and not say, "Hey, you see that thing? I worked on that."
Good point. All right. Excellent insight there from Kyle McDonald of Western Specialty Contractors, project manager. You hit the nail on the head on so many subjects. So I want to thank you again for taking the time today. Kyle, for anyone that wants to learn more about you and your team at Delray Beach, as well as Western as a whole, how can they learn more? How can they potentially get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, so Western has a great social media presence. You can find us on Facebook, Western Specialty Contractors. You can also find our website, westernspecialtycontractors.com. That's going to have a list of everything we do, as well as how opportunity to get a hold of us down here in Delray Beach, Lauderdale area. And our contact info is right there. Just hop on the website, hop on social media, and we'd love to be involved with you, getting this stuck with you.
Kyle, thank you so much for the time.
Ben, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, and that will do it for today's episode. And if you want more content from our end at Coatings for AMP, just check out our websites, coatingsformag.com for the magazine and amp.org for the association. And of course, search for the Coatings Pro interview series wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, this is where we'll break. For Kyle McDonald, I'm Ben Dubose. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new Coatings Pro podcast.